Each year, we look forward to the high-quality video presentations that have become a highlight of our conventions. Work is underway on videos and dramas for future conventions. The set construction and other work needed for the series The Good News According to Jesus is well along. Additionally, planning and construction of our new media production facility in the United States is moving ahead steadily. All of these efforts are supported by voluntary donations. If you would like to have a share in supporting the worldwide work of Jehovah's Witnesses, one way you can do so is through your financial contributions. For more information, please visit donate.jw.org. We have seen that Jehovah promises us a future filled with happiness and peace. How will universal peace come about? And what will it mean for mankind? Please pay close attention to Brother Jeffrey Jackson, a member of the governing body, as he answers those questions in the final talk of this convention entitled, Universal Peace is Sure to Come.
What is true peace? For those who live in lands where they have wars, no doubt the focus they have on true peace is to stop fighting, to stop the conflicts, to not have any wars. And it's true that peace does include an absence of war. But in many cases, the efforts of mankind to try and gain peace by stopping wars is similar to what we say is a band-aid solution. What do we mean by that? Well, a person may have a horrible sore, perhaps even cancerous, and if he just puts a band-aid over the top, maybe it hides the sore, but really doesn't solve the problem, does it? Because peace is not just an end of war. You know yourself, if you were to live in a country where there isn't any war, but still you're worried about your health, your well-being, and your safety. If you feel sick and hungry, would you say that you're having a peaceful life? Of course not. According to the Bible, the word peace means far more than just an absence of war. It means good health, well-being, and safety. And from our convention, we've seen that there's a lot involved with true peace. It includes having a peaceful relationship with Jehovah God. It also means having a peaceful relationship with others. And also, it includes the peace of heart and mind that gives us tranquility. But now in this final talk, we're going to consider a bigger issue, and that is universal peace. Now, what do we mean by universal peace? What we mean by universal peace is the type of peace that is everywhere in heaven and on earth, in all aspects of life. It's the type of peace that only the God of peace, Jehovah, can bring, along with the Prince of Peace, Jesus Christ. Soon, they will take dramatic steps toward the restoration of universal peace. Let's take our Bibles, and if we turn together to Romans chapter 16 and verse 20, we'll see what's included in this restoration of universal peace. That's Romans 16 and verse 20. There we're told, "For his part, the God who gives peace will crush Satan under your feet shortly. May the undeserved kindness of our Lord Jesus be with you." Yes, the restoration of universal peace also includes the crushing of Satan the devil. So in our final discussion, the final talk of this convention, we're going to consider 4 basic questions. The first one is, when was universal peace disturbed? Secondly, who will restore universal peace? The third question, how will it be restored? And then finally, we're going to think about what further blessings mankind will enjoy at that time. But before we go on to answer those questions, let's review together the program that we've had. I'm sure you'll agree, this has been a beautiful convention, and it's encouraged us to pursue peace. But what are some of the good points that you remember from the program? Well, as we mentioned already, there are three aspects to peace that were discussed. First of all, our peace with Jehovah God. The Friday program finished with the final talk, and that's where it mentions about not being misled by imitation peace. And then Sunday, what a beautiful public discourse we had. It said there that friendship with God, how possible. And then the second aspect of our peace is peace with one another. The first day, remember, we had that beautiful symposium on family peace. What were some of the things that we need to do to have peace in our family? Well, love and respect are important. We need to improve our communication with one another. We need to work as a team and worship together. And then Saturday, we had another interesting symposium when it said about peace wreckers, things that can wreck peace. You remember some of those? Inappropriate boasting, envy, dishonesty, harmful gossip, and uncontrolled anger. And then the third aspect of peace deals with our personal peace, our inner calm despite trials. On Saturday, we had a very interesting talk that mentions the need to safeguard our bond of peace. And then on Sunday, we went through another symposium where it gave examples of those who had sowed peace and then reaped peace. As we look through the program, I'm sure there's so many points that you can remember that you enjoyed. Of course, one of the highlights at any convention is when we have the baptism. If you were baptized at this convention, we'd like to welcome you. Yes, welcome you to the Christian Brotherhood, because we know that you're working hard to have peace with Jehovah God. But now at this point, let's watch a video that gives us some lessons with regard to what we saw in the various videos in this convention. Enjoy.
Hey everyone, Brooke here. Guess who just walked in? Olivia. And there's Jake. Would she ever? No, she would never. She's an angel.
It feels out of your control, doesn't it? Remember when we studied about the Shulamite girl? Who was really in control?
She was.
And you have the same power. If you believe that, it'll change how you handle the pressure.
My peace comes from doing the right thing. I am a wall.
You're just a coward. Take your trash.
Think about what the jailer had done to Paul. He could have hated him for it.
Yeah, he could have, but I guess he saw the jailer's pain instead of just his own. Let me show you just one scripture.
All right, one scripture.
Jehovah has taught us to love, and he's given our family peace.
Hello everyone, Hayley from Junior Design here.
You don't think she's showing off?
Is this just about Hayley?
Can you believe her?
I haven't seen all her posts.
If Celia agrees that Hayley's doing something she shouldn't, you should talk to her.
I've noticed your posts lately on Quick Posts.
What about them? Some people might think you're bragging.
Who would think like that? You?
I didn't want to upset you. Jake said that I needed
Jake
to say...
said everyone thinks my posts are inappropriate.
That's not what I'm saying at all.
You are such...
Think back to a time when you wanted forgiveness. Love is patient and kind. It's not jealous.
I'm sorry, Hayley.
Genuine affection fights peace wreckers, and affection grows when we really know our brothers and sisters well.
I was always impressed with how close you two were.
Well, wasn't always that way.
No. What started as a small disagreement exploded.
You're the problem.
I needed a lot of help from Jehovah to make things right with Nick.
There was a misunderstanding that got blown all out of proportion, and I didn't handle it the best.
That's when our peace was really put to the test.
The body decided unanimously that he should no longer serve.
Because you pushed them.
Phil didn't know just how tense things were between Tim and I.
I found comfort in accounts of Jehovah's servants. They helped me realize that being at peace with my brothers was more important than any appointed position.
It wasn't easy, but we talked it out.
And we were able to make peace with Jehovah's help.
Without peace, I don't know how we could have managed what was to come.
At that moment, when you hear the verdict that you'll stay in prison, it's like you've been knocked unconscious. But then, the doors of the elevator opened up, and in front of us, that's Jehovah. When you're just about to lose all your strength, Jehovah does that something for you.
The Russian brothers and sisters, I pray for them constantly because they're going through a very tough time.
What I've learned from all of this is peace isn't from what's outside, from what's going on, or what you're experiencing. I've learned that peace is on the inside, and that comes from Jehovah.
What priceless lessons those were. But now at this point, friends, we're going to turn our attention to that bigger issue, universal peace. Remember the first question we're going to answer? When was universal peace disturbed? Before mankind was created, universal peace existed for countless ages. It was just like a beautiful pond of water that was undisturbed, no ripples, mirror-like in appearance. In other words, there was utmost harmony with Jehovah and with all the spirit creatures. But then it's just as if a rock was thrown into that beautiful pond, and peace started to be disturbed. When do you think that happened? Well, we'll find the answer to that question by turning to the Bible, and this time if we look at 1 John chapter 3 and verse 8. That's 1 John chapter 3 and verse 8. Notice the answer to the question, when did the problem start? There we're told, the one who practices sin originates with the devil, because the devil has been sinning from the beginning. For this purpose the Son of God was made manifest, to break up the works of the devil. So notice the answer to the question, because the devil has been sinning from the beginning, or as the footnote says, from the time that he began. Does that mean right from the very time when he was created? No, he wasn't the devil then, was he? He was a perfect angel. So when was it that this universal peace started to be disturbed? When was it that the ripples started to go through the universe? Well, you might remember that it wasn't at the time that he deceived Eve. It's a little bit like the Bible says with a woman who gives birth to a child. That's not when the child's life starts, is it? It starts well before then. So likewise, this disruption of the universal peace began in heaven first, at the time that the angel who became Satan started to covet the position of Jehovah, to want worship from others. And by doing this, he alienated himself from God, and no longer was he in harmony with Jehovah's will. Then that sinful attitude was manifested in the Garden of Eden. That's when he took the next step and started to disturb the peace of Adam and Eve. And of course, they lost their peace with God. But let's take a moment and think about what was really involved with those events there in the Garden of Eden. Some very important issues were raised. Remember how Satan, first of all, spoke to Eve. He asked what seemed like a ridiculous question. Is it true that God hasn't allowed you to eat from any tree in the garden? All the trees are banned? Well, of course, that's ridiculous. But what was he doing? He was calling into question Jehovah's qualities. Yes, he was inferring that Jehovah may not be so generous. Maybe he's stingy. Perhaps he's holding things back from Adam and Eve that they really should have. And then Satan went one step further. He said, "You will not die." Really, what he was saying is, Jehovah is a liar. What a horrible accusation. Sadly, Eve didn't defend Jehovah. We would have expected that she would have said to Satan, "Who are you? I don't know you. Why would I believe you? I know my loving Heavenly Father, Jehovah." But no, she sided with the devil. So what would Jehovah do? Well, think for a moment about this. What if someone accused you wrongly in front of everybody, calling you a liar, saying all sorts of bad things about you? What would you do? Would you go and punch them in the face? Well, if you did, that wouldn't be the right thing to do, and it certainly wouldn't answer the questions raised. You see, was that person really true in what they said or not? How would you probably solve this? Well, you may take the person to court. And in that court case, that person could offer whatever evidence they feel they have to prove that you're a liar. On the other hand, you could produce witnesses to prove that really you aren't a liar, but you're very truthful. And then finally, there would be a decision made as to who was right and who was wrong. Well, in a similar way, these issues, these questions raised in the Garden of Eden started a symbolic court case. So how did Jehovah respond? Wisely, he allowed time to settle these issues. He allowed Satan the opportunity to try and rule mankind, to do things his way. At the same time, mercifully, he provided the hope for the unborn children of Adam and Eve. You remember in Genesis chapter 3, verse 15, it speaks of an offspring or a son who would come later and eventually undo the bad that Satan had done there in the beginning, and eventually free mankind from sin and death. But what has Satan been doing since this opportunity has been given to him? He's still craving worship from other people. He wants them to bow down to him and acknowledge him as their God. He also uses lies and deceit to blind the minds of persons. And he also has great anger, particularly at this time in history, where he knows his end is near. And so he's influencing the world to hate anyone who stands up on Jehovah's side. But now let's think about a very interesting question. Even though we're living in a world that is ruled by Satan, is it possible at all for us to have a measure of peace with God. We're experiencing so many trials and challenges. We face opposition, we have illness, economic problems, disasters. Is it possible to have some measure of peace? The answer is found again in the Scriptures, and this time, if you turn with me, please, to the book of 2 Corinthians chapter 1. 2 Corinthians chapter 1 and verses 3 and 4. Notice this beautiful promise. Praise be the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, the Father of tender mercies, and the God of all comfort, who comforts us in all our trials, so that we may be able to comfort others in any sort of trial with the comfort that we receive from God. Isn't that a beautiful scripture? What does it highlight? Notice, Jehovah obviously is aware of our suffering. He feels for us. He wants to help us. It mentions He's the Father of tender mercies. But at the same time, we realize that Jehovah won't step in and fix all our problems at this point. Why? Because this is the time that Satan has the opportunity to try and rule the world. And the problems of this world really come from Satan. At the same time, we wouldn't expect Jehovah to step in and start to solve the problems as if He were helping Satan, the devil. But there is a time when Satan will be taken away and the problems will be solved. We could think of Jehovah's position similar to that of a father whose son is running in a marathon race. As he sees his son running in the race, he may see the son is starting to tire out. Or perhaps he may see that others in the race are not obeying the rules. Does that mean that the father then jumps in and takes the place of his son and helps him as he runs along? No, the rules don't allow it. But what the father can do is continue to encourage his son. Keep on going. Yes, you can do it. So in a similar way, what did this verse tell us? It said that Jehovah gives us comfort. How does He do that? He gives us peace by means of His Word, the Bible, by means of Holy Spirit, and by the loving brotherhood that we have. So at this point, what we'd like to do is have a look at a video that will highlight how Jehovah lovingly helps us even in times of need.
We are living in critical times, hard to deal with. Many people have lost all hope, and servants of Jehovah are not free from trials. We may face loss of property, loss of health, loss of loved ones. We may experience deep emotional trauma, or even imprisonment for our faith. Our trials are similar to those of Job, a faithful servant of Jehovah who was so saddened that he once asked, "Why didn't I die at birth?" Perhaps we've had moments like that. But why should we not lose hope? Because with every trial comes Jehovah's support. Support received in many forms. Material support. Emotional support. and spiritual support. And while Jehovah will not remove all our trials now, we trust that with His support, we can endure them until they disappear in the real life to come. Psalm 34:17 and 18 says, "They cried out, and Jehovah heard. He saves those who are crushed in spirit."
So we can see, even though our peace has been disturbed, we can enjoy peace with God. So let's think about our second question. Remember, that question was, who will restore universal peace? Well, we already saw the answer when we referred to Genesis chapter 3, verse 15, the first prophecy in the Bible. It mentioned the promised offspring or son, and that one is Jesus Christ, the Prince of Peace. He has the key role in restoring universal peace. Very soon, He's going to take decisive action to remove this old world and then take progressive steps toward the restoration of universal peace. But why can we be so sure that Jesus will come soon? It's a very simple answer. By seeing the current events that are happening in the world today. Yes, as we look around us, we see so many things that are happening that prove to us that Jesus will soon step in to help us. Now, how can we say that? Well, let's have a look together at that famous prophecy that's recorded in Matthew chapter 24. Matthew chapter 24 and verse 3. Remember, the apostles at this particular time were asking Jesus a very important question. It's at the second part of verse 3. It says they asked, "Tell us, when will these things be? And what will be the sign of your presence and of the conclusion of the system of things?" Now, you remember, no doubt, from your previous studies of the Bible, how Jesus then went on to list many events that would occur during the last days. He mentioned wars. He mentioned earthquakes. He mentioned famines and all sorts of pestilences. Truly, we have seen those things happen in recent times. In addition to all of that, Matthew 24, verse 14, mentioned the need to preach the good news of the kingdom. But there could be some who perhaps may doubt a little and say, well, there's been wars all through time. There's been earthquakes at other times, not just in the last days, and food shortages. So why can we be so sure that this is the time when we know that Jesus will soon bring about an end to wickedness? Well, let's use an illustration. Most of us are familiar with using a computer. Now, when you sit at your computer, what's the first thing that you need to do after you've turned it on? Usually you have to type in a password, don't you? And you have to get it right. You have to put in all those numbers and letters that are required. Otherwise, you won't be able to start working on the computer. Now, these days, people are very concerned about having strong passwords. What do you think if you had a password that had 24 different letters and numbers? That's a very strong password. And it would be very difficult for someone just randomly to try and find out what those numbers were and unlock your computer. Well, how does that relate to the sign that Jesus gave? Notice that if you look back at Matthew 24, verse 3, the question was not the signs of your presence, but the sign. Just like a password, one sign. But then that sign has many different features. In fact, at least 24 different features. So even though there have been wars in the past, this is the time when we see all those features coming together at one time, and in that way, we could say it opens the fulfillment of Bible prophecy. Yes, as we look around us, as we listen to the news each day, we can see that there is a definite fulfillment of what Jesus said. Truly, the end is close. It's just like a jigsaw puzzle, to use another illustration. When you have all the pieces of a jigsaw puzzle and you start to put them all together, eventually when all the pieces are in place, the picture is clear, isn't it? And that's exactly how we should feel about the prophecy that Jesus gave. Soon, very soon, he is going to step in and take action. But of course, sometimes we may feel, yes, we've known about this for quite some time. And it means that we've had to wait a long time. But that doesn't negate the fact that the evidence of the last days is here. Perhaps we could illustrate it this way. Most of us have gone to an airport to meet someone who's coming maybe from overseas or another part of the country. Now, since 9/11, it's very hard to go to an airport and actually stand on the side of the runway and see the plane land. Usually what happens, once you get to the airport, you're allowed to go into a large room with other people, and all you see are monitors on the wall. Now, what may the monitors say? Well, you see it says there, the flight has left. Then later, maybe the monitor says the flight is on time. Then it says the flight has landed. Then it says the flight is taxiing. Then it says at the gate. Well, now you're starting to get really excited, aren't you? And yet you haven't seen the plane and you haven't seen your friend yet. But you can see from the indications of what you're seeing on the monitor that it must be close. And then all of a sudden the doors open, people start to come out. Well, now you're really excited because you know, yes, you're going to meet your friend. Well, that is similar to how we can view the last days. There's been a lot of things happening that we don't actually see, but we see the indications of what's happened. And we know that very soon, Jesus, the angels, and the 144,000 will take steps to remove this old world and then take further steps toward the restoration of peace. Isn't that a beautiful promise? So naturally, that takes us to the third question. How will universal peace be restored? What will Jesus need to do? Basically, we could say there are two actions required. One is to remove Satan and the peace disturbers. And then the second action is to undo all the evil that Satan has done. You see, we don't want a Band-Aid solution, do we? Where you're just hiding something that's very serious by putting a Band-Aid over it. So not only does Jesus need to take away those that are disrupting the peace, but he also has to take steps to heal mankind and to heal the earth so that all the evil, the bad things that Satan has done will be overturned. So let's think about those two actions for a moment. Remember, the first one is to remove the peace disturbers. What steps are involved with that? Remember, this is a progressive action. If we take our Bibles and turn to the book of Revelation, we'll see there are several things mentioned here that help us to see how progressively Jesus has and will bring about this removal of peace disturbers. If you turn with me, please, to Revelation chapter 12, let's read together verse 9. Revelation 12. Now, immediately, no doubt you remember that Revelation 12 is talking about the time when Jesus' government, his kingdom, was established in the heavens. That was in 1914. In verse 9, it mentions what happens shortly after that time. Let's read it. So down the great dragon was hurled, the original serpent, the one called Devil and Satan, who is misleading the entire inhabited earth. He was hurled down to the earth, and his angels were hurled down with him. Do you notice that word that came up several times? Hurled down. You see, Jesus didn't go and say to Satan, well, look, if you don't mind, we'd like you to relocate to the earth whenever you're ready. No, Satan was hurled down. And what confidence that gives us. That means that Jesus has the power to be able to remove Satan from the heaven. That gives us some idea what's going to happen in the future with regard to the earth. Of course, now we're living in a time when Satan and his demons are here in the vicinity of the earth, and they are causing so much trouble. So what's another step that Jesus will take in removing those who disrupt the peace? Well, let's look at another chapter in the same book, Revelation chapter 19. Revelation chapter 19, and we're going to read starting at verse 19 right through to 21. We might mention before we start reading it that here it describes political organizations, kings, and those who oppose Jesus and Jehovah God. And in a symbolic way, it refers to these as beasts, as organizations that have disrupted the peace. Let's see what happens to them. And I saw the wild beast and the kings of the earth and their armies gathered together to wage war against the one seated on the horse and against his army. Now that one is Jesus Christ. And the wild beast was caught, and along with it the false prophet that performed in front of it the signs with which he misled those who received the mark of the wild beast and those who worship its image. While still alive, they both were hurled into the fiery lake that burns with sulfur. So what happens to these political organizations in opposition to Jehovah and Jesus? Again, we see the word hurled down into destruction. And what about the rest of mankind that opposes Jesus' rule? Well, let's look at verse 21. What does it say? But the rest were killed off with the long sword that proceeded out of the mouth of the one seated on the horse, and all the birds were filled with their flesh. Now that's a very interesting comment, isn't it? It helps us to see here that all those who oppose Jesus will be destroyed in the Battle of Armageddon. So that's another step in getting ready for universal peace. First of all, Satan is cast out of heaven. And then secondly, at Armageddon, all those humans who rebel against Jesus and reject his rule, they will be taken away, destroyed. But there's something else too. Let's look at chapter 20 of Revelation. Chapter 20 and verses 1 through 3. It says, And I saw an angel coming down out of heaven with the key of the abyss and a great chain in his hand. He seized the dragon, the original serpent, who is the devil and Satan, and bound him for 1,000 years. And he, notice the word again, hurled him into the abyss, and shut it and sealed it over him, so that he would not mislead the nations any more until the 1,000 years were ended. After this, he must be released for a little while. What do we notice from this description? You see, gradually, in a progressive manner, Jesus will eradicate and remove those who disrupt peace. So Satan and his demons cast down to the earth. At the Battle of Armageddon, those who rebel will be destroyed. And then Satan will be put in a symbolic prison in this abyss for 1,000 years, along with his demons. So that's the first action that Jesus needs to do, to get rid of these troublemakers. That opens up the way for what the Bible refers to as the 1,000-year reign of Jesus Christ with his kingdom and co-rulers. What is going to happen during that 1,000-year reign? Remember, we said it's not a Band-Aid type solution, is it? He will need to help mankind and the earth to heal. Notice, please, how this is described for us in a scripture that we've already read. Let's turn to it again. 1 John chapter 3 and verse 8. Remember, in the beginning of that verse, that's where it told us how universal peace was disrupted in the beginning, at the time when that angel became the devil and started sinning. But notice what it says in the second part of this verse. For this purpose, the Son of God was made manifest to do what? To break up or to destroy the works of the devil. Isn't that an amazing concept? Jesus not only removes those who disrupt peace, but he will break up the works of the devil, the things that he's done over these thousands of years that he's been ruling this earth. That means all the evil, all the suffering, death, all of that will be taken away. Mankind will be gradually healed. Now, Jesus started to break up the works of the devil when he willingly gave his life as a ransom. So even now, we have the opportunity to gain a measure of peace with Jehovah and with others. We can ask Jehovah for forgiveness based on the ransom sacrifice. But during the 1,000-year reign, there'll be further things that Jesus will accomplish. Notice these three aspects. He will undo all harm. Now that includes sickness, war, disease, famine, all these problems. All the harm will be undone. He will also undo death by resurrecting those who have died. And he will also undo sin by helping mankind to grow to perfection. Isn't that a beautiful promise? Undoing all these works of the devil. And then by the end of the 1,000 years, what will we see with regard to the earth? It will be a paradise. It will be exactly as Jehovah purposed it to be in the beginning. Yes, Jesus, by means of the kingdom, will have completely broken up the works of the devil. Now, is that the time then when universal peace is restored? No, not quite yet. Why not? Something else has to happen. And we're going to reread another scripture, and that's Romans 16. Remember, we referred to that in the beginning. And here we see a very interesting connection between two different things. So that's Romans 16, verse 20. For his part, the God who gives peace will do what? Will crush Satan under your feet shortly. Do we see the connection here? Universal peace is connected with the crushing of Satan the devil. So universal peace can only be restored after Satan has been destroyed. Now, what events will occur leading up to Satan's destruction? Well, remember, as we read already in Revelation, Satan is going to be allowed to be released from that prison, the symbolic prison, and he'll have an opportunity to try to mislead people who are living on the earth at that time. Those who join Satan will be destroyed forever. Then Satan will be permanently destroyed. But what will happen to those perfect persons who prove faithful to Jehovah? Let's see what the Bible says if we turn to the book of Romans. Romans chapter 8 and verse 21. Romans 8, verse 21. that the creation itself will also be set free from enslavement to corruption and have the glorious freedom of the children of God. What does that really mean? It means that at that point, everyone will become part of Jehovah's universal family. All intelligent creatures in heaven and on earth will be united as one family in the pure worship of the one true God, Jehovah. What a beautiful time that will be. But what further blessings are involved with this process of gradually bringing universal peace? Well, during the 1,000-year reign of Jesus, there's going to be wonderful blessings. Those who are obedient to Jehovah and Jesus will experience the things that were described in the Bible book of Psalms, in Psalm 72. Let's turn there together. Psalm 72. And here we see portrayed some very interesting prophetic statements about the 1,000-year reign. You'll notice at the beginning it says regarding Solomon. So although initially this was referring to an extent with regard to Solomon, but Jesus mentioned that he's greater than Solomon. So this has a prophetic application to the 1,000-year reign. Let's see what it says about peace. Starting at verse 1, we'll go through to verse 4. O God, give your judgments to the king, and endow the son of the king with your righteousness. May he plead the cause of your people with righteousness, and of your lowly ones with justice. May the mountains bring peace to the people, and may the hills bring righteousness. Let him defend the lowly among the people. Let him save the sons of the poor, and let him crush the defrauder. What a beautiful description of what will happen in the 1,000-year reign. Yes, all those who, under Satan's rule, were lowly, beaten up, disadvantaged, all these will experience relief because of the righteous rule of Jesus Christ. Let's go down a little further to verses 12 through 14. It tells us a little more about what Jesus will accomplish. Starting in verse 12, we're told, "For he will rescue the poor who cry for help, also the lowly one and whoever has no helper. He will have pity on the lowly and the poor, and the lives of the poor he will save. From oppression and from violence he will rescue them." And notice this very interesting expression. "And their blood will be precious in his eyes." What does that mean? Their blood will be precious in his eyes. In the Bible, usually the word blood is associated with life, isn't it? So it's saying that each person's life will be precious to Jesus Christ. What a beautiful description of what will happen during the 1,000-year reign. Then if we go back a little to verse 5, we'll notice that this part of the psalm helps us to see how widespread peace will be at that point. It uses very picturesque language. Notice there in verse 5 it says, "They will fear you as long as there is a sun." Well, we know the sun continues on, so they'll continue to fear him. "And as long as the moon remains, for generation after generation. He will be like the rain that falls on the mown grass, like showers of rain that water the earth. In his days the righteous will flourish, and peace will abound until the moon is no more. He will have subjects from sea to sea, and from the river to the ends of the earth." Yes, what a beautiful description of the peaceful arrangements that will prevail during the 1,000-year reign of Jesus' kingdom. But then the 1,000 years finishes. What can we expect when that reign ends? I'm sure you're going to enjoy our consideration of a very special part of the Scriptures, 1 Corinthians chapter 15. Please turn there with me, and we're going to go through and look at what these verses tell us about after the end of the 1,000-year reign. The section of Scripture we're going to consider is 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verses 24 through 28. Starting in verse 24, we're told, "Next, the end, when he hands over the kingdom to his God and Father, when he has brought to nothing all government and all authority and power. For he must rule as king until God has put all enemies under his feet. And the last enemy, death, is to be brought to nothing. For God subjected all things under his feet. But when he says that all things have been subjected, it is evident that this does not include the one who subjected all things to him. But when all things will have been subjected to him, then the Son himself will also subject himself to the one who subjected all things to him, that God may be all things to everyone." What do these verses tell us about the end of the 1,000-year reign? Well, let's go back to verse 24. There it says, "Next, the end." Now, this end mentioned here is not Armageddon. This is the end of the 1,000-year reign. At the end of the 1,000-year reign, there are some other things too that will have finished. That means, for a start, the end of the kingdom arrangement. There will also be an end to sin, which means that mankind will no longer need the ransom or a mediator or a priesthood. And then verse 26, notice it says, "The last enemy, death, is brought to nothing." In other words, the graves will be emptied. Those who have experienced the Adamic death will have been brought back. Mankind will all attain to perfection with the end of sin, Adamic sin. So at that point in time, something very, very special happens. What is it? Well, let's go back in the beginning of our discussion when we talked about the problems that occurred in the Garden of Eden. Remember, Satan the devil raised some issues that resulted in a symbolic court case that involves the sanctification of Jehovah's name. Yes, Satan had claimed that Jehovah is a liar, that he doesn't rule mankind out of love. He even raised a question later about who would actually serve Jehovah. So this issue has continued on, the issue of the sanctification of Jehovah's name, right down through history. And over again, Jehovah's name has been sanctified. His reputation has been vindicated. We can see that he's a loving God, unlike Satan, such a horrible person. But Jehovah has stood out as being the loving Heavenly Father. So now, at this point in time, we can say the universal court case comes to a conclusion. The issue is settled. The verdict is given. In what way? Well, Jesus has just finished ruling mankind for 1,000 years along with the 144,000. They've made the earth a paradise. Mankind is now no longer sinners. They're perfect. All the problems have been healed. So at this point in time, what does Jesus do? Does he follow the example of Satan and say, well, I think we did a very, very good job for this 1,000 years, so let's just keep everything in place and we'll keep on ruling in the kingdom? No, we saw what he does. At that point in time, there's a marvelous answer in this court case because Jesus hands over the kingdom back to his Father. He submits to Jehovah's rule, and it's just as if Jehovah is told by his loving Son Jesus, you were right all along. This whole thing has been a terrible travesty of justice. Satan is a despicable liar, and all mankind, including Jesus and the 144,000, submit themselves to Jehovah's rulership. Yes, the end of the universal issue. Jehovah will then rule directly over perfect mankind. But is that the point in time when universal peace is restored? No, remember, there's some other things need to occur. We've already mentioned that Satan will be released from his symbolic prison. He'll have an opportunity to try and mislead some. And those who side with him, Jehovah morally and ethically doesn't have to wait any longer and say, well, let's have another court case. No, they are executed immediately. But what about the rest of mankind? They become Jehovah's sons and daughters. They can talk to him directly without the need of a mediator, and their names will be written permanently in the book of life. They'll be approved to live forever in paradise. So at this point, when we're thinking about all these beautiful things that will occur, let's enjoy the final video of our convention. It highlights the blessings of the 1,000-year reign and beyond. And also, we're going to listen to the original song that we'll sing at the conclusion of our program.
Like an island of calm in dark, stormy seas, God's people are living in peace. With our eyes of faith, we see beyond the clouds and know that the storm soon will cease. To the ends of the earth, there'll be peace at last for all eternity. From the valleys below to the mountain tops, all creation will see peace at last. When the new world is here, all will be one on earth and in heaven above, and the peace we'll know we've never known before, a world ruled by justice and love. To the ends of the earth, there'll be peace at last for all eternity. From the valleys below to the mountain tops, all creation will see peace at last. To the ends of the earth, there'll be peace at last for all eternity. From the valleys below to the mountain tops, all creation will see. To the ends of the earth, there'll be peace at last for all eternity. From the valleys below to the mountain tops, all creation will see peace at last. Peace at
What a beautiful song. And what beautiful images to encourage us. So, brothers and sisters, we've enjoyed our convention program, haven't we? Let us be determined to keep pursuing peace, not an imitation peace, but the real peace. We can enjoy rich blessings now by having a peaceful relationship with Jehovah God, yes, trying to continue to maintain peace with one another, and also attaining to this inner peace, calmness and tranquility, because we have friendship with the God who gives us hope. And that hope helps us to look to the future, even though we have difficulties now, and we look forward to the time when universal peace is finally restored. But in the meantime, may the God of peace be with each one of you now and forever.
Thank you, Brother Jackson. Your talk and this entire convention have strengthened our confidence in Jehovah's prophetic word and helped us to understand how close we are to its fulfillment. On behalf of the governing body and all the hard-working members of our Bethel families and translation offices around the world, we thank you for watching the 2022 convention program. We have deep appreciation and affection for each one of you, and it is our prayer that Jehovah continue to bless you with peace. Let's conclude by singing a song that reflects the complete peace that Jehovah will soon bring about. Please join in singing the original song, Peace at Last, which we heard during the concluding talk. After the song, you may have your concluding prayer at your individual locations. Now we invite all to sing out, along with the Watchtower Chorus, Peace at Last.
Like an island of calm in dark, stormy seas, God's people are living in peace. With our eyes of faith, we see beyond the clouds and know that the storm soon will cease. To the ends of the earth, there'll be peace at last for all eternity. From the valleys below to the mountain tops, all creation will see peace at last. When the new world is here, all will be one on earth and in heaven above, and the peace we'll know we've never known before, a world ruled by justice and love. To the ends of the earth, there'll be peace at last for all eternity. From the valleys below to the mountain tops, all creation will see peace at last. To the ends of the earth, there'll be peace that